1. Alone is where you hear the call, not the crowd. When you're by yourself, you're not distracted by the noise of opinions, expectations, and applause. That's where clarity lives. That's where direction speaks. Most people avoid solitude because they fear silence, but silence is where purpose whispers. Greatness doesn't need a crowd to get started. It needs conviction. If you're waiting for validation before you move, you've already lost the battle. Alone is not a weakness. It's a weapon. 2. Stop running from solitude. That's where strength is built. Being alone doesn't mean being broken. It means you've entered the gym of the soul. No spotters, no cheerleaders, just you, your thoughts, and your God. That's where mental muscle gets forged. That's where emotional scars become strength. If you only feel powerful when people are around, you're not powerful, you're dependent. Learn to stand when nobody's clapping. Learn to believe when nobody's watching. 3. They left you alone so you could learn to lead yourself. Rejection isn't always cruelty, it's construction. Sometimes people leave because God's trying to teach you how to walk without being carried. You don't grow in the circle of comfort, you grow in the field of isolation. Leadership starts with self-mastery, and self-mastery begins in solitude. Let them go. Let them misunderstand you. You were never meant to be led by opinion. You were meant to be led by vision. 4. You're not isolated, you're being insulated for impact. Don't confuse isolation with punishment. Sometimes God pulls you away to prepare you. Before the platform comes the process. Before the light comes the lesson. He's not hiding you, he's shaping you. Diamonds aren't made in public. Warriors aren't built in the crowd. You're not alone because you're forgotten. You're alone because you're being formed. 1. Alone is where you hear the call, not the crowd. There is a sacred silence that speaks louder than any crowd. In that quiet space, when the world's noise is shut out and all distractions are stripped away, something incredible happens. You begin to hear what was always calling you, but you were too busy to listen. Being alone is not the absence of people, it's the presence of clarity. It's the moment when you finally realize that the calling on your life was never supposed to come through the mouths of others. It was meant to rise from within you. When you're alone, you aren't lacking. You're locating. You're locating your true voice, your inner compass, your authentic drive. For too long, many people live in performance mode, adjusting themselves to please people, chasing praise, shrinking or stretching to fit into rooms that were never meant to contain their true size. And because they're constantly surrounded by noise, opinions, advice, applause, criticism, they lose touch with the voice that matters most, the one inside. That's why being alone isn't a weakness. It's not loneliness, it's alignment. The moment you pull away from the crowd is the moment you begin to rise into your calling. The crowd cheers your comfort zone. The call challenges it. The crowd rewards popularity. The call demands authenticity. And those two paths rarely cross. In fact, some of the greatest moments of transformation come not in the company of many, but in the company of yourself. That's when you face your truth. That's when you confront your fears. That's when you begin to dig through the layers of who you were taught to be so you can uncover who you really are. And let's be honest, it's uncomfortable at first. Silence can feel suffocating when you've never sat still with your soul. Solitude can feel like punishment when you've depended on other people's voices to guide your every step. But growth doesn't come from comfort, it comes from confrontation. And to confront your life, your habits, your excuses, your patterns, you need space. Space from the distractions, space from the expectations, space from the noise. The world teaches us to stay connected, plugged into everything and everyone all the time. But what good is being connected to the world if you're disconnected from yourself? We've got people who know the trends but don't know their truth. People who follow everyone but don't even know where they're going. They live loud lives on the outside but have no inner peace on the inside. There's a difference between a voice and an echo. The crowd is full of echoes, repeating ideas, reposting opinions, recycling beliefs. But when you're alone, you hear the voice. That distinct, divine, undeniable voice that speaks to your destiny. That's not an echo. That's purpose. That's direction. That's fire. You can't hear that voice in a room full of noise. You can't discover your vision while trying to fit in with everyone else's parley. You weren't created to blend in. You were created to break through. But breakthrough doesn't come in the crowd, it comes in the cave. In that place of isolation where you wrestle with your fears, confront your doubts, and come out knowing exactly who you are. And that's why so many people avoid being alone, Because they don't want to face the truth that they've settled, the truth that they've been performing, the truth that they've let the opinions of others drown out the voice of purpose. But freedom starts when you face what you've been running from, and you can't do that with a crowd around you. You need stillness. You need solitude. You need silence. Alone is where your gifts get sharper. Alone is where your vision gets clearer. Alone is where your faith gets tested and strengthened. Think about the greats not in terms of fame, but in terms of fulfillment. The people who truly live out their calling are the ones who were willing to step away from the comfort of the crowd to discover the conviction of their own soul. They had to walk away. They had to shut the door. They had to turn off the noise. Not because they hated people, but because they had to prioritize purpose over popularity. There's a cost to the call. And one of the first payments is isolation. Not forever, but for a season, a sacred season of becoming. But most people miss that season. They get lonely and run back to the crowd. They feel the silence and fill it with noise. They get uncomfortable and go back to what's familiar even if it's unfulfilling. Don't do that. Don't run from the discomfort. Run through it, because on the other side of that silence is strength. Your clarity is waiting for you in the quiet. Your healing is waiting for you in the alone place. Your breakthrough is hiding behind the distractions you keep entertaining. What if the very thing you're avoiding, solitude, is the very thing you need to step into the life you were created to live? Stop waiting for applause to affirm your calling. Stop needing confirmation from people who can't even hear the frequency of your future. If they were meant to understand your journey, they'd be walking beside you. But if they're not there, it's not because something's wrong, it's because something's right. You've been pulled away to be pulled up. You've been separated to be strengthened. You've been isolated to be initiated. You've been alone to be aligned. Don't despise this season. Don't curse the quiet. Lean into it. Listen in it. Grow in it. Learn to be your own confirmation. Learn to be your own encourager. Learn to sit in silence until your soul speaks. You don't need the crowd to begin. You don't need the masses to move. You don't need the spotlight to step forward. Your assignment isn't tied to applause, it's tied to obedience. If the call came to you in the quiet, it means you're supposed to move in the quiet. Let your movement speak louder than your mouth. Let your discipline roar louder than your doubts. Let your alone time be your advantage and not your excuse. You will always have to choose between the call and the crowd. The crowd will tell you to fit in. The call will command you to stand out. The crowd will offer safety. The call will demand sacrifice. The crowd will clap for who you pretend to be. The call will confront you to become who you really are. If you want real growth, you have to get real quiet. You have to shut out the distractions. You have to sit in the stillness, because that's when the real work begins. Not in public, but in private. Not in performance, but in preparation. Not when everyone is watching, but when no one is around. Alone is not empty. Alone is essential. It's where your next level is formed. It's where your confidence is developed. It's where your convictions get built. If you can be faithful when nobody sees you, you'll be unstoppable when everybody sees you, because your strength won't come from applause, it'll come from alignment. You can always tell who's been alone with themselves. They walk with quiet authority. They move with purpose. They don't need to be loud to be heard. They don't need to be seen to feel secure. They've been through the fire of solitude, and now they carry a presence that the crowd can't create. That's the power of being alone. You're no longer controlled by the opinions of others. You're no longer swayed by every voice you hear. You're no longer searching for external approval because you've already found internal alignment. You're no longer performing, you're just becoming. So next time you feel alone, don't panic, pause. Ask yourself, what am I supposed to hear in this silence? What am I supposed to see in this stillness? What part of me is being exposed, refined, awakened? Because the truth is, the most powerful moments of your life won't be loud. They won't be posted. They won't be publicized. They'll be in the quiet moments when you chose the call over the crowd. When you said yes to purpose and no to performance. When you stopped asking for permission and started moving with conviction. That's when the shift happens. That's when the fire gets lit. That's when the voice of destiny finally has space to speak. And it doesn't shout, it whispers. But you can't hear that whisper until you step away from the noise. Alone is where that whisper becomes a roar. Alone is where the vision gets rooted. Alone is where you stop chasing and start creating. Alone is where the calling becomes louder than the criticism, and where peace becomes louder than pressure. You don't need more people around you. You need more clarity within you. And that clarity will never be found in a crowd. It will only be found in the quiet. Alone is not where you lose yourself. Alone is where you finally find yourself. Because that's where the voice that called you from the beginning finally becomes louder than everything that tried to drown it out. 2, they left you alone so you could learn to lead yourself. There comes a moment in every journey where the crowd thins out, where friends fade, where support disappears, and you're left standing in a silence that feels more like abandonment than alignment. But that's not the truth. The truth is, they didn't walk away to break you, they left so you could begin to build. They didn't reject you to wound you, they stepped aside so you could rise without depending on them. Because sometimes the only way you will learn to lead is by first learning how to walk alone. Being left alone forces you to confront what you've been avoiding: your own responsibility, your own patterns, your own ability to stand without a safety net. It makes you question whether you're strong enough, whether you're ready, whether you've got what it takes. But it's in that very questioning that leadership begins. Because leadership doesn't start with power. It starts with pressure, it starts with loneliness, it starts with learning how to navigate darkness without needing someone to turn the lights on for you. The people you thought you couldn't live without, their exit is not your end. It's the beginning of your development. You thought they were essential, but they were temporary. You thought they were anchors, but they were actually limitations. And now that they're gone, you've got space to grow into the version of yourself that was always possible but never necessary until now. When you're surrounded by others, it's easy to lean on their opinions, their energy, their momentum. But when they walk away, you've got to generate that fire from within. You've got to dig deep. You've got to push yourself. That's where leadership is born. Not in convenience, but in chaos. Not in applause, but in abandonment. The ones who rise are the ones who refuse to retreat just because the room emptied out. And here's the paradox. The moment you learn to lead yourself is the moment you're finally fit to lead others. Because now your leadership isn't rooted in approval, it's rooted in identity. It's not about who's following you, it's about who you've become. People can see that, they can feel that, they respond to that kind of grounded strength. But you only gain that kind of strength by walking through seasons where nobody's there to hold your hand. Let's be honest, many people want the crown but not the crushing. They want the stage but not the solitude. But if you skip the season where you lead yourself, you'll never survive the seasons where you're required to lead others. Because leadership is weight. And if you haven't built the muscles of internal discipline, emotional control, and spiritual clarity in solitude, the pressure of public responsibility will break you. That's why being left alone was necessary. Not because you were being punished, but because you were being prepared. You needed the silence to sharpen your discernment. You needed the isolation to identify your real values. You needed the separation to see who you are without the opinions and expectations of others clouding your mirror. It's in solitude that your true motives are revealed. When there's no audience to impress, you start to ask yourself why you're really doing what you're doing. Are you working from validation or from vision? Are you chasing likes or chasing legacy? These are the questions that never get asked in the crowd, but they must be answered in the cave. And once you answer them, once you confront the truths you've been avoiding, you step into a new dimension of yourself. You realize that everything you thought you lacked, you already had. It was just buried beneath codependence, people-pleasing, and fear. But now that the people are gone, the layers start to peel off. And what's left is not weakness, it's wisdom. Not emptiness, but elevation. That's when your perspective shifts. You stop seeing their absence as betrayal and start seeing it as a blessing. You stop cursing the quiet and start listening to the lessons it holds. You stop waiting for someone to push you and you start pushing yourself. That's leadership. Not telling people where to go, but showing them what it looks like to go first, even when you're afraid, even when you're unsure, even when you're alone. And make no mistake, people will come back. The very ones who walked away will one day witness what you've built. But you won't need their approval anymore. You won't need their applause. Because you'll have become something they never expected: self-led, self-aware, and secure. That's the real reward of solitude. Not just survival, but transformation. You don't just come out stronger, you come out clearer. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you stand for. Clear about where you're going. And that kind of clarity can't be faked. It can't be borrowed. It can't be given. It can only be developed alone. So if you're in that place right now, left out, walked away from, misunderstood and rushed to fix it, don't rush to fill the space. Sit in it. Lean into it. Let it do its work. Because this season is sacred. This season is shaping you for what's next. It's building the kind of character that can't be shaken by popularity, pressure, or pain. Nobody becomes a real leader without first being left to lead themselves. It's not just a stage, it's a test. A test of your discipline, your consistency, your vision, your faith. And when you pass that test, when you learn how to carry your own weight, you become someone who can carry others without collapsing under the pressure. You see, the people who walked away weren't the problem. Your dependence on them was. And now that they're gone, you're being given the gift of self-reliance, not arrogance. Not isolation for isolation's sake, but alignment. The ability to walk with your head up, your feet grounded, and your spirit steady no matter who's with you or against you. Because true leadership isn't measured by how many people follow you. It's measured by how far you can go when nobody's watching. And when the time comes to lead publicly, you won't lead from insecurity. You'll lead from integrity. Because you've been through the fire and you didn't fold. You've been through the loneliness and you didn't quit. You've been through the silence and you came out speaking with power. They left you alone so you could learn that your purpose wasn't tied to their presence, that your destiny doesn't depend on who shows up, but on whether you do every day, in the dark, in the quiet, in the discipline of becoming. That's where leaders are made. And make no mistake, you were made to lead, but first you had to be emptied, stripped of the need to be needed, released from the weight of outside affirmation, purified from the pressure to perform. And now that you've been alone, now that you've faced yourself, you're ready to carry the vision, ready to set the pace, ready to walk forward with a confidence that's not loud but deep, not flashy but unshakable. The silence was never meant to scare you. It was meant to shape you. The absence of others was never meant to punish you. It was meant to position you. You're not abandoned, you're being aligned. You're not forgotten, you're being formed. You're not empty, you're being empowered. And the leadership you're stepping into now, it will not be surface level. It will not be shallow. It will be rooted. It will be real. Because it will be built on the solid foundation of someone who has walked through the storm of solitude and came out with something more valuable than popularity identity. So the next time you feel like you've been left behind, remember this. It's not rejection. It's redirection. It's not the end. It's the edge of a new beginning. One where you don't wait for others to lead you because now you've learned to lead yourself. 3, you keep trying to fit in where you were born to stand out. From the moment we're born, the pressure to conform is constant. Fit in at school, fit in at home, fit in at work, fit in with trends, fit in with timelines. But somewhere along the way, if you're honest, you've started to feel like a square peg being jammed into a round hole, shaved, chipped, and sanded down just to match the expectations of people who don't even know your purpose. Every time you adjust who you are to fit where you are, you shrink. You dim your light to comfort people who are uncomfortable with your brilliance. And you start to forget that you weren't designed to fit in. You were born to stand out. Standing out isn't arrogance, it's authenticity. And there's a difference. Arrogance demands attention. Authenticity draws it naturally. You're not here to be a copy. You're not here to be a cheaper version of someone else's vision. You're not here to blend into the background of someone else's story. You were born to lead, to build, to break molds, to change atmosphere of sand. You can't do that by trying to fit in with environments that can't handle your difference. But here's the trap. Fitting in feels safe. It feels stable. You don't get rejected. You don't ruffle feathers. You don't attract conflict. But you also don't grow. You don't evolve. You don't impact. And worst of all, you lose sight of who you were made to be. Because you become so consumed with matching everyone else that you stop recognizing your own reflection. There's a reason your spirit doesn't settle when you compromise your identity. There's a reason you feel tired, not just physically, but emotionally after pretending to be less than what you are. You weren't meant to perform. You were meant to live. And there's freedom in that truth. Because once you accept that you were never meant to fit in, you can stop apologizing for the way you're wired. You're not too much. You're not too intense. You're not too loud. You're not too quiet. You're not too ambitious. You're not too different. You're exactly what this moment in time needs, but only if you stop hiding the parts of you that don't match. Fitting in is about survival, but standing out, that's about legacy. And the cost of your legacy is your comfort. You've got to get uncomfortable with being misunderstood. You've got to be okay with people walking away. You've got to accept that not everyone will get your vision. Not everyone will cheer you on. Not everyone will support your growth. And that's not a problem. That's part of the process. Because every time you water yourself down to fit in, you rob the world of the fullness of what you were created to offer. You rob your calling of its clarity. You rob your future of its fruit. And no amount of comfort is worth that kind of loss. If you spend your life trying to blend in, you'll die wondering what would have happened if you had just had the courage to be yourself. Think about every innovator, every world changer, every person who's ever left a mark on history. They didn't fit in. They were criticized, misunderstood, mocked, marginalized. But they didn't let that stop them, because they understood that standing out is lonely before it becomes legendary. You don't get the reward without the resistance. You don't get the breakthrough without the breaking away. Standing out means being okay with seasons where you walk alone. It means being secure enough in your identity that you don't need everyone to validate your journey. It means trusting that the difference in you is not a defect, it's your distinction. And distinction is what separates the average from the exceptional. Let's be clear. The world doesn't need more of the same. It doesn't need more carbon copies. It needs your voice, your perspective, your background, your pain, your wisdom, your fire. That thing you've been hiding, that's your superpower. That wound you thought disqualified you, that's your wisdom. That dream that won't let you sleep at night, that's your calling knocking. But you won't step into any of that if you keep trying to be what everyone else already is. Standing out is scary because it's vulnerable. It requires you to show up fully, to speak up when others stay silent, to move differently, to think differently, to live differently. And with that difference comes criticism. But here's what you need to know. Criticism is confirmation. If nobody's questioning you, it probably means you've stopped growing. If nobody's resisting you, it probably means you're not leading. Because true leadership, true innovation, true purpose, it all provokes something. Not because you're wrong, but because you're real. And real always disrupts what's fake. So stop second-guessing yourself because you don't fit the mold. You weren't made for the mold. You were made to break it. You were made to reframe it. You were made to show others that there's another way to live, to lead, to love, to succeed. That's why you feel frustrated when you try to conform. It goes against your calling. You were made for more. And more will always require you to be different. More will always require you to stand alone before others stand with you. More will always mean letting go of the comfort of conformity so you can embrace the challenge of authenticity. But here's what happens when you finally own your difference. Everything aligns. Your energy aligns. Your relationships align. Your purpose aligns. The right people find you. The right doors open. The confusion lifts. Because now you're not trying to be accepted, you're walking in authority. Now you're not trying to be liked, you're focused on being effective. And that effectiveness, that's what your generation needs. They don't need perfection. They don't need someone who checks all the boxes. They need someone bold enough to break the box, to tear down the limits, to live without fear, to lead without apology. That's what makes a life count. Not blending in, but breaking through. So the next time you're tempted to shrink, to stay silent, to settle, remember this: you are the exception, not the echo. And the exception always stands out. The echo fades, but the original sound shapes the space it enters. That's you. You're not here to mimic the world, you're here to move it. You keep trying to fit in with people who were never assigned to your destiny. You keep trying to match a pace that was never yours to run. You keep trying to wear labels that don't belong to your identity. No wonder you're tired. No wonder you feel out of place. That's the consequence of living beneath your truth. But when you step into your truth, when you own every part of who you are, you stop trying to fit and start learning how to fly. You realize that your uniqueness is not an inconvenience, it's an invitation to lead, to create, to break cycles, to build something that didn't exist before you had the courage to be yourself. That's not easy. It takes guts, it takes grit, it takes grace, but it also brings greatness. Because the moment you stop trying to fit in is the moment you start finding where you actually belong. And that place was tailor-made for you, not the version of you that pretends, but the version that's powerful, passionate, and unfiltered. So don't apologize for your fire. Don't dim your brilliance. Don't dilute your dreams. You weren't put on this earth to match the room you were born to light it up. You weren't created to agree with the crowd. You were created to challenge the culture. That's why your difference matters. That's why your voice matters. That's why your journey matters. You're not here to be normal. You're here to be necessary. And what's necessary will never look like what's popular. It will look like courage. It will look like sacrifice. It will look like consistency. But in the end, it will look like purpose. The kind of purpose that sets people free not because you fit in, but because you stood out.